This little thing is called the X-Pro Hawk, and it's a piece of junk that you can buy on Amazon from China. 229cc engines, really nothing exciting, but it does get the job done. This bike did everything I asked it to do on the trails over the weekend. Now, it might not have done it as well as my old Japanese dual sport, but it did do it. And it less than half of the price what I've got into that dual sport. This bike comes in at around 50 pounds lighter than my DRZ, which you really notice at low speeds on the trail. I had one incident where I tipped it. And throwing this thing around, picking it back up is no issue. With a 35.5-inch seat height, it might not be the most approachable for some riders. I know my brother got on it, made one of the mirrors disappear because, well, he wasn't tall enough to touch the ground. It does come with inserts for the foot pegs, but if you're going to be doing anything other than riding this on the road, I'd rip them out, throw them in the trash. Now, it does have a 2-up seat with passenger pegs for some odd reason. I wouldn't exactly feel safe riding 2-up on a bike this light, but at least they gave you oh shit handles. Now, the stock tires that come on this unit have surprised me. They do fairly well off-road, fairly well on the road. They hooked up. Slate rock, clay, they did the trick. Now, the previous owner did put an aftermarket carburetor on it. It works reasonably well, and I assume it did add some power, because I have no idea how this thing made it up some of the hills that it did. Now, where I'm at, this carburetor struggles because I'm going up and down couple thousand feet in elevation in a day. It's not particularly fond of that with a carburetor. My DRZ has electron carburetor on it, so it fixes that issue. Now, as far as modifications go, I'm pretty sure there's next to nothing you can do to this bike except for throw a carburetor on it. I don't think anybody makes an exhaust or anything like that, but why would you for something like this? This is going to be something people buy and just run the way it is until it dies, and then either upgrade to a Japanese bike or buy another one. Now, quality, it's janky. I did have a crash, and folded the shift lever. They brutally need to reinforce it because I was able to just grab it and bend it back. Looks brand new. Now, you definitely get an $1,800 dual sport. It has much lower quality parts than you'd expect out of a Japanese bike. It's got a couple screws loose. You know, a couple things are looser than they should be. But I will say, this did everything that DRZ did. A lot slower, I'll have you, but it did achieve the same goal from getting to point A to point B on the trail, and it did it for less than half of the price. It's mind-blowing. And it went on some rough trails that it shouldn't have been on at all, frankly. But it did it. It was a blast. Shall we roll some clips? Roll the clips. Grabbing first. It's a turd. The front suspension is made of straight pudding. Just straight pudding. Adds no confidence as far as when you're on the trail, really getting up and over, especially downhill. Downhill, this thing is terrible for front end because you can't get up over the rear because you got this hump in the seat. I don't know, if they flatten that seat out, maybe lowered the rear a little bit more, this thing would be much more capable off-road just because you'd be able to get back over that rear tire a little bit easier to weight it and float the front a bit more. Now the front forks are tiny. You don't have a whole lot of travel. You blow through the travel really quickly. They're there. It has shocks. It's got off-road suspension. The brakes on this thing are remarkable. For a Chinese unit, you could stop the whole bike with just breathing on that brake. Wonderful brakes, which makes no sense to me because it's 229cc air-cooled bike that weighs less than 300 pounds. Why they put brakes this good on it, I don't know. It's got steel braided brake lines. Hydraulic front and back. Wonderful. Now they definitely did some cost cutting. The plastics are cheap. The headlight is cheap. Don't ride it at night because you're wasting your time. Headlight's there. Definitely recommend getting an aftermarket battery for it because it needs it. This one I haven't gotten a battery for yet because, well, it's got a Kickstarter. Now, if it starts on the first kick, it's because it's warm. It's definitely a machine that likes to be very warm when you kick it. Carbureted, air-cooled. It's a little bit finicky sometimes, but it still starts every time. Sometimes doesn't like to necessarily, but I'm sure if I had battery on it, used the electric start, it'd be a bit better. Let's see if it starts. Let's get a little clip of it starting. Is it in neutral? It's not in neutral. It does have a neutral light. Again, biggest gripe about this bike is by far the gearbox. 5 speeds. Now, I don't think it has enough power that you'd need a 6th. Finding neutral with the bike running, damn near impossible. Just turn it off, find neutral. Terrible. If you're stop and go traffic, just use the clutch. It's got a featherweight clutch to it. Reasonable clutch feel for a $2,000 Chinese unit. Been sitting here for about 20 minutes, so we'll see how many kicks it takes to get it going. My neutral light's not lighting up. Oh well, it's in neutral. Oh, almost. 2 kicks, not bad. Ish. God, it's gonna give you some trouble when it's cold. Uh-oh. I don't know. It starts. It's not the easiest, but it started. $2,000 bike. It did go. It did start. Now, for some reason, no matter how much I just brutally wanted to hate this bike, I just couldn't. We got out there on the trails, and it was just a blast the entire time. In some ways, the little bit extra challenge from the lack of power and the crappy suspension made it just that much more fun. Now, I am interested to see what this would do in a long-term review, or we could strap a big old bottle of nitrous onto the back of it and see if we can get it to keep up with my DRZ.